Thank you very much for coming out this evening. Tom and I really appreciate it's a great turnout here. So the scheduled events will be, Tom will do a reading. I think we chose the opening statements of the trial. Now, if you remember back in, may or may not remember, the September 1999, it was actually Halloween 1999, May Grinder was walking in the woods with her doctor husband in the town of Wellesley. We all know Wellesley is an affluent community, not a place that you'd have a murder. In fact, the last murder in Wellesley was well over 30 years before that date. I was a homicide investigator for this case. I happened to be in the area, and I responded pretty quickly on that Sunday morning, Halloween morning, and it turned out to be an 18-month investigation. And what we did is sometime after, this is not a mystery, I'll tell you right now, he did it. But what we did is I was asked by family members if I would put my thoughts and what actually happened in this investigation in a book form, which I did, and certainly with the help of Tom Farmer. Tom has been with this case for since I was with this case, and it only made sense to Belinda Markell, May Grinder, the victim in this case's niece, and I, that we give Tom the ability. Tom not only was a reporter, but he's actually an excellent writer. Those of you who have read the book, I can tell a story, but bridging those stories together to make some sort of sense was Tom's expertise, and I thanked him for many times for doing such a marvelous job on my jumbled thoughts. So what we'll do tonight is we're going to do a reading, and then we'll open the floor up to questions. And believe me, we'll answer any questions that you have. Don't hold back. And I do want to take the opportunity to thank the town of Milford, in particular, the town public library here, for a sizable donation to our cause, Jane Doe Incorporated. If you don't know, a portion of the proceeds of our book goes directly to Jane Doe Incorporated. Jane Doe is a women's advocacy group that helps women all over, but certainly here in this particular area, as well as the general Massachusetts area. And it's more about educating young men and about domestic violence, and also other horrible things that happen to women. And we can answer questions about that as well. So with that was my brief introduction. I don't want to take any more time away from Tom. Tom will do the reading, and afterwards we'll open the floor back up to questions. Agreed? All right, very good.
Thanks so much, everybody, for coming out tonight. And again, thanks to the Friends of the Library for your generous donation to Jane Doe. It means a lot, and it helps a lot. Just quick show of hands, how many people have actually read the book? Okay, how many people are familiar with the case? Okay, good. So what I'm going to read is the opening arguments of the trial. You're going to hear some names. Marty Murphy was Dirk's defense attorney. Rick Grundy was the prosecutor. Judge Chernoff was obviously the judge. Marty made mention of May's sister, Il Stark, and niece, Belinda Markell. They were aligned with the prosecution in this case. The doctor's 3 adult children supported him throughout this case. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory. There's one little blurb in here where the judge is talking about how much of Marty Foley's testimony will be allowed into evidence based on his first conversation with Dirk down at the pond. So that's what that is when I get to that. So here we go. We haven't done this in a while, so this is going to be good. Before seating the jury, Judge Chernoff met with the lawyers at sidebar, almost like an umpire going over the ground rules before the first pitch. At 62, he had been hearing criminal and civil superior court cases for 15 years, having been elevated after 9 years as a justice at Newton District Court. Chernoff's legal career was highly regarded. The diminutive judge could infect a courtroom with his enveloping good nature, almost like a teddy bear in black robes, handing out pieces of hard candy during recesses. More apt to talk to reporters about his adored Boston Red Sox during breaks in the proceedings, the judge carried a baseball onto the bench autographed by Sox fireballer Pedro Martinez for inspiration. Enveloped by a huddle of lawyers at the sidebar, Chernoff revealed his final interpretation of where the first 5 minutes of Marty Foley's conversation with Dr. Grinder ended during his initial interview the day of the murder. I drew the line on the Miranda issue with the defendant saying that he checked the carotid artery, Chernoff told the attorneys. It may go further on re-examination depending on evidence that is presented. Signaled to proceed with his opening statement, Rick Grundy settled in front of the jury box as the jammed courtroom held its collective breath. The prosecutor opened with words from the man he was determined to send to prison for life. Is she dead? Am I going to be arrested? Grundy began, reciting the questions Dr. Grinder had asked Officer Paul Fitzpatrick in the minutes after his wife's murder. 30 to 40 minutes after this defendant called the Wellesley police to say his wife had been attacked, Grundy continued, he stood in that circle area that we visited yesterday with Officer Paul Fitzpatrick, a uniformed Wellesley police officer, and those are his words. This physician, Grundy pointed accusingly at the defendant, calmly taking notes as if he were at an asthma seminar. Is she dead? Am I going to be arrested? Grundy repeated, firing the first salvo in what would be an exhausted effort to discredit the outwardly respected doctor. Mocking Dr. Grinder's claims that he had checked his wife's carotid artery when she was obviously dead, the contrast between the doctor's clean hands and his blood-covered clothing spoke the real truth, the prosecutor asserted. Ladies and gentlemen, he stressed, unfortunately, you will see pictures of May Grinder's carotid artery, of her entire neck area. I want you to think of this defendant telling individuals that he checked her carotid artery as he stood there with Officer Paul Fitzpatrick and those clean hands. Taking the jury through an overview of his voluminous yet varied evidence, Grundy told the jury Dr. Grinder's arrest resulted from elaborate plans gone awry. Too elaborate, too thought out, he said. Items left behind, items that will have a link, as you will see, to this defendant. Telling the jury that May was a mother and a dedicated wife who loved, cared for, and nurtured her children, Grundy tried to persuade the jurors that her husband was not the respected family man he seemed, but instead harbored deeply and closely held secrets. Taking a more measured approach, Marty Murphy opened his shorter statement by telling the jurors they had to put aside whatever sensational details they had heard about the case and decide Dr. Grinder's guilt or innocence based on the real stuff, the evidence. Whoever it was that smashed the back of May Grinder's head with a 2-pound drilling hammer, that cut her throat, that stabbed her twice in the chest and stabbed her 5 times in the head, whoever that is, it's not this man, Murphy said, glancing at his client, distinguishably posed at the defense table. Hitting the sex allegations head on, Murphy for the first time publicly admitted Dr. Grinder was unfaithful to his wife. This case is not about whether Dr. Grinder committed adultery, Murphy began, eyes in the courtroom shifting to see the reaction from his client's children. If the charge here was that Dirk Grinder committed adultery, the evidence will show that Dirk Grinder is guilty of that charge. If the charge here was that Dirk Grinder used the internet for sexual gratification in ways that you might find very disturbing, if that were the charge, the evidence will show that Dirk Grinder is guilty of that charge. But Dirk Grinder is not charged here with adultery or infidelity or use of the internet for sexual gratification in ways you might find disturbing. He is charged here with the murder of his wife. All of those things had nothing to do with the murder of May Grinder, Murphy implored. Instead of searching for the person who killed May, the police focused right away on Dr. Grinder, Murphy accused, yet never tested his hands for the presence of blood. Attempting to cast more doubt on the prosecution's case, Murphy dramatically revealed the discovery of DNA on May's fleece glove that came from someone other than the victim or her husband. What that means, members of the jury, is that the state's own DNA experts found DNA from an unknown stranger at this crime scene, he said, his voice rising for effect. Who is that stranger? Murphy grandly inquired. Well, the answer is, members of the jury, we don't know. We don't know because the state, the police, and the prosecutors did not conduct a fair and objective search for the truth. As Murphy finished, Kirsten rushed from the courtroom, the admission of her father's sordid dalliances perhaps too much for her. But returning to her front row seat a short time later, the doctor's oldest child forced a reassuring smile when her concerned father craned his neck to look back at her. The divide between Dr. Greiner's children and their relatives from New York did not go unnoticed by the jury, even though they would adhere to Judge Chernoff's instructions not to discuss the case or follow it in the media. The panel had yet to learn the names of the two obviously grieving women sitting away from Dr. Greiner's children or their relationship to May, but it was clear they had come to a conclusion about the defendant's guilt different from the one of his three impressive children had chosen. From day one, we noticed the family was on one side and his kids were on the other, and we all knew they were not looking at each other, said juror Mike Paul. There were obviously issues. From their front row seats in the jury box, Sarah Barbera and Dr. Bill Giesick saw nothing strange in the Greiner children's support, even though they knew that the attractive young adults were strategically positioned by Murphy for their benefit. They were there for us, said Giesick. The dentist, thinking of his own grown children, couldn't imagine what they would do if thrust into the same nightmarish dilemma dropped on the Greiner siblings. To imagine your mother being murdered is one thing. To imagine your father being the murderer is just incomprehensible, he sympathized. I don't think it can be done. To Barbera, who was pregnant with her first child, the Greiner children had no other option but to support their disgraced father. I totally understand where they were coming from, said the expectant mother. If you believe he's guilty, you have no one. You don't have a mom, you don't have a dad. Determined to decide Dr. Greiner's fate based on the evidence, the jurors would notice May's relatives every day in court, but the divisive emotions resulting from her death were put aside. We were going to look at this without being influenced by some of those obvious ploys, said juror Cheryl Nixon, an English professor at Wellesley's Babson College. That was something we tried to uphold. The reporters made their first run at Belinda and Ilse at the lunch break as they uncomfortably walked out of the courthouse. Ilse sternly rebuffed the approaching journalists, telling them only that she might have something to say after the trial. Her daughter gently tugged at her as they quickened their pace out the front door. Walk, Belinda had ordered her mother upon seeing the advancing reporters. Alone in the sanctity of Belinda's big SUV, the two women tried to decompress. We were like, holy shit, Belinda recalled. I didn't expect the media presence that was there, and it was overwhelming. I had to get out of Dedham for those 45 minutes at the lunch break. We had to get out of there. We both needed some breathing room to regroup. It was almost like every part of your body hurting from being tense. So that kicked off what was a 6-week trial that was broadcast gavel to gavel on court TV, and it was quite an event.
Thanks, Tom. All right. So, one thing I'd let you know too. Tom was in the courtroom every day for every hour of this 6-week trial. I wasn't. I was sequestered. In fact, we were actually still investigating this crime even during the trial. So I was taken away from the courtroom a lot, and Tom was in there every day. So what you hear, a lot of the comments, and you'll see in the book that these are first person eyewitness type comments that Tom could lend to this book, and it really was telling too. A few thoughts, you know, as Tom's reading it, it comes back to me like it was yesterday. You heard the first thing about the Miranda issue, and that was a one of those catch-22s for both sides. If they stopped my testimony, when I arrived at the scene, I didn't Mirandize him. He called us to report his wife's Attack. It wasn't a murder. It was an attack. And of course, I just went there and asked, "What happened?" And then he just kept on talking. But at some point, the judge felt that I should have stopped him and Mirandized him, something I could argue to this day. But and then the judge actually did make a definite stop in my testimony for a little bit. Then the defense realized we already use this word, so I can say, "Oh shit! If Marty doesn't talk about what else was said, it's going to make our client look pretty silly." So eventually, I did tell the whole story of what Dirk Greiniger told me at the scene. And you also heard Tom explain about the dynamics of the family. So if you can just think, we're sitting in this room now here, the defense, you guys are the defense over here, and you people are the prosecuting people. And right in the front row was Ilse and Belinda behind Rick Grundy at the prosecuting table. And over here, the 3 grown children, 2 of whom are physicians, the third, all of them Ivy League educated, standing behind their father, sitting right there in the front row behind their father, who would occasionally turn around and give them little nods of thank yous, or just saying I love you, whatever. And the jury is right there. So you can see it's a very close-knit area, and we knew that this was going to happen. And we knew telling a story to the jury, we needed everything we possibly could, because this was not a slam dunk case. Those of you who've read this book know that, and it's actually, the book is written exactly the way I investigated it. It's a timeline fashion. Some people, I think a great criticism of the book, which is positive, was it reads like a novel. There are ebbs and flows, good things and bad things, and that was natural. Tom articulated those things through his way of words, but the story just went on like the investigation went on, and we had good days, we had bad days. Some days we just kept pushing for more information, and oftentimes we didn't get what we were looking for. But in an investigation, it is what it is, and you deal with what you have. So when this case finally went to trial, and these statements are made on day one, we just had to rely on that the information we had was good enough to be able to find guilty on this horrible murderer. So, with that, any questions? First person, yes.
So what did the doctor say to you?
So what he did, first of all, his demeanor, and I can't judge somebody on their demeanor because I never met this man before in my life. Before you answer the question, has anybody here met Dr. Greiniger? There's always one. There's always one. I'm not going to point you out. So I didn't know what type of person this was, except I'm standing face to face with him. May is about 150 feet off my right shoulder on the ground, obviously, in some wooded area. And I noticed that he never, ever looked that way. Now, I can't draw any conclusions from that. I'm just telling you what I saw. The second thing is that he had a nasal discharge like a little baby would have when they're teething. I know it's a sign of stress. His wife is right over there. I'd be stressed as well. So he had a story that he wanted to tell me, and I stopped him in the beginning and said, well, what happened yesterday? What am I looking for? Is there anybody else involved here? Was there any threats to you or your wife? And he said, no, it was just like a normal day. They told me exactly what he did. Very particular how he did this and telling his story right up through. They were walking in this park, and they decided to walk in a sandy gravel pit area. May, who had a bad back, hurt her back. So he being the right, and they were walking with their German Shepherd dog. He, being the good husband, leaves her and says, I'll go walk the dog. Actually, what he said, May convinced him to leave to walk the dog down to the pond, about 300-400 yards, and they would meet a short time later at a prescribed location. When he got to that rock where they're going to meet, obviously she wasn't there. He went to go find her and found her on the ground. What he said to me is that he tried to perform CPR. He checked her carotid artery. Now, at this point, I viewed May from about less than 100 feet, but I didn't want to get anywhere near her because of the type of ground that she was on. It was kind of a sandy dirt, and I was concerned that I didn't want to introduce anything into that scene that's my footprints or anything. So I viewed May from a distance, but from that distance, it was clear that she was dead. There's no question about it. Her body position, everything about her looked to me like she was dead. So now I go back to this guy, and he said he checked her carotid artery, right hand carotid artery. I'm telling you, I saw her carotid artery. Didn't feel it, I could see it. He savagely opened that neck up so much. And, but again, I didn't see this. Something else happened that Tom alluded to, and this is really, is part of the whole Mirandized issue. You heard about Officer Fitzpatrick and the conversations that Dirk had with Officer Fitzpatrick. Clearly, Dirk is thinking, am I going to be arrested? Unfortunately, that information was not given to me until about a month later. So if I knew that as I'm walking up to Dirk and where his mind was, the first thing I would have done is I would have Mirandized him. Because I'm thinking, what's he thinking? Okay, he's thinking he's going to get arrested. All right, well, let's cover all the bases. I wasn't in that mindset at all. Of course, in the court's eyes, it makes no difference what my eyes see. It really doesn't. It's the defendant's mind. What was he thinking at that time? Of course, we had a lot more information 30 days later, but then again, it is what it is. So, he did say he checked her carotid artery. And he's telling this whole story that, this is what we did. So the next question I asked him is, I asked him if he'd washed his hands, because his hands were clean. In fact, he didn't wash his hands even at this picture. This is a real picture of his hands. The right hand's a little distorted, thanks to the publisher, but he didn't. He said, no, I was with you people the whole time. Now, at that point, I'm thinking, okay, he wasn't with us the whole time. I don't know what he did, and I don't know how long he was before he found his wife and he made the phone call to Wellesley Police Department. I don't know that, but he certainly wasn't with me. So now that's the first thing I hear, that, okay, there's something wrong here. It could be something wrong, but I don't know. So I don't Mirandize him. I stopped talking to him. I had to get he had clothes that were obviously part of the crime scene. He put himself there. He tried to pick her up. He tried to check her carotid artery. So he's part of the crime scene. I needed his clothes. I told him I needed his clothes. I asked him to come back to Wellesley Police Station, which he did, and he was really concerned, very, very concerned about the health and being of his dog that he had put in the van when he called the police. Okay, so again, I'm thinking, really? This is what we're concerned about? But what I did tell him, we'll get back, and you can make as many phone calls as you want. And as soon as we get back to the police station, he said, I want an attorney, and that's fine. You know, I wasn't going to talk to him anymore at this point anyway, and I didn't. So that's basically what he said. That's a long answer, huh? Next question. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
What was his motive?
Great question. The question was, what was his motive? So in Massachusetts, we don't have to prove motive. But anybody who here has sat on a jury, you always want to know why. Makes sense. So we, and I can tell you right now, we missed the boat on this because it was plain as day. We thought the motive was his second life that he was leading. And he was clearly leading a second life with prostitutes and internet pornography, or even worse than that. But he had this whole second dark side. And we had thought that perhaps May found out about that and maybe even threatened him with revealing that. This was a highly prestigious doctor in Boston. And so we went with that. We wrote the book, and we started doing these book talks. And I got a call one morning after one of our book talks just like this, and the woman said, "You got it all wrong." I said, "What are you talking about?" Is "You have this all wrong. This is a case of domestic violence. A simple case of domestic violence. A horrible case of domestic violence." So I asked, "Well, how do you know that?" Of course, I knew what the answer was going to be. So she is a victim of domestic violence, a current victim. Now, we have Jane Doe in our corner. We've been learning from Jane Doe. I've been a police officer at this point for 18 years, and I know it's a case, it's a murder, but you know what? He just didn't murder May that day. There was history that we never uncovered. The family never divulged to us. The children of May Grinder never ever spoke to me. They had lawyered up very, very early on in this investigation. So that's why he did it. It was about control. Like 25% of the women in this country go through every day. It's a case of domestic violence and control. And the weird thing about this whole case is his family were growing up and growing out, as we as parents want our children to do. He kills May, the kids all come back in a weird sort of way, and they answer to him. "What do you want, Dad? What should we say? What can't we say? We're going to talk to the press." People magazine comes in, they have the flowers, they have the fruit on the table. This is all set up by Dirk Grinder. He was in control. So in my opinion, yeah, he had the dark side, no question about it. This is about domestic violence. A horrible, horrible case about domestic violence. And while I'm on it, May Grinder is no different than what's happening today in this world. The only reason we wrote about May Grinder is because I was asked to write about her. I could have, there's cases in Milford right now that deserve attention. The only reason I did this, and when you write a book, you put it out there. You know, and again, something else that Tom and I discussed, if we're going to do this, it's not going to be a Marty Foley, the super cop. This is going to be the good, bad, and indifferent. This is how an investigation happens. So that's why he did it. But, you know, we didn't bring it up in trial, not even a little bit. Wait 1 second. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I keep bad eyesight.
May and Dirk, I mean, the name Dirk, what was their background?
So Dirk, sure. Dirk was educated. Dirk was born in Berlin, Germany, 1940. His father was was an SS officer. He was actually a physician. Worked at Buchenwald concentration camp. 1945, their family left Germany to Lebanon, where he lived till he was 18 years old or so. When he was 18, he moved. He basically went to Yale University and actually had dual citizenship with the United States in Lebanon. He went to Case Western Medical School, met May in and around that time. May was born in, actually was born in Columbia, moved to New York City, went to Hunter College in New York, and was a nurse. She went to nursing school, and she was a nurse. But she hadn't worked as a nurse since they had children. When Dirk became a physician, they moved to Bethesda, Maryland, and then eventually to Wellesley. And Dirk was a practicing physician. His expertise was asthma, childhood asthma. He also taught, and he was a researcher. I think he thought himself more of a researcher than a clinician. At least that's who he wanted to be. Unfortunately in life, that's not where the money is. The money is with the patients. But that's who he was. Answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Yes.
The woman that called you and said she knew it was domestic violence, how did she know that?
So, because she was a victim. And I spoke to her a little bit. She told me where she lived. I happen to know the chief of police in that town. I asked if she had contacted the police in that town, and she had. I personally talked to the chief in that town, and I spoke to him personally about this woman's issues, and he was well aware of it, and it was confirmed that, yeah, she's being stalked from a relationship that happened many, many states away. So that's how she knew. Now, and you know what? I'm not an expert in that. She was about as close as, she certainly was more of an expert than I was. And, but I looked at it, and I told Tom about this too. I looked at it in a different light. It's just like, the light bulb goes off. We didn't have a great motive. We knew we did it, but we never really answered why. Jury asked the same question. Great thing writing this book. We brought the jury in. This is two and a half years afterwards. And we had a conference room in a hotel. In fact, one of the hotels that Dirk visited. And it's unlimited. What can I do, And it was so weird and strange. They came in and they sat around the table exactly like they were in deliberation. They started conversations exactly what they were doing back then. And we had a list of questions that we were going to ask them. What we ended up doing is put a microphone on the table and let them talk. And kind of like the way I do an investigation, talk to me. And if there's something I don't know or something that hasn't covered, then I'll ask particular questions. But they were great. And of course, they asked, the motive part of it, and they were very, very sharp jury. There was lots of professional people. Actually, the gamut of just like you'd want a jury to be, from mailman, bartender, students, mothers, doctors, professors. The whole gamut was on this jury, and I think they really did a great job as far as taking all the information that they got. 6 weeks of information, and then they whittle it all down and come out with the answer. I think they only had one vote.
Yeah, it was fascinating to see what resonated with them and what didn't, because you don't know what they're thinking and what evidence they put more weight into and didn't. So that was really fascinating to get that feedback from them after watching them for 6 weeks and not being able to talk to them.
Yes.
I have several questions. Where is he now and how is he doing? My second question is, you've met him. Do you believe that it was domestic violence?
It's the only thing that makes any sense.
Because she was so brutally,
Exactly,
killed.
yeah. It's the only thing that makes sense. I knew him fairly well.
And the dark side of him now, I hope I'm not getting him mixed up with anybody else, but wasn't he a transvestite?
Oh,
Different. Well,
that's
not,
the other murdering doctor I know.
not that we, not that we know of. Not that we know of. So right now, he's in,
Richard Sharp.
he's in Norfolk. So that's where they put the old people, in Norfolk prison. Norfolk prison. So he was at Susan Baranowski for a while, and then he made his way down here. We actually, the last time we spoke to a group a few weeks ago, there was a woman who was at some capacity in the prison system, and he gets along very, very well. In fact, he's known as the good doctor, because you could imagine the prisoners, you have to have value in prison. Nobody's going to raise their hand because I'm not going to ask the question who's in prison. So I don't care. But everybody needs, you have to have value to get through. And you either, the huntee or the hunter. And he had some value. So people kind of, and I knew this from other people talking to me about him, people needed him to get the right medications or diagnosis, and he would tell them what they have to get certain things. So I think he's doing fine. I know he's still doing a lot of research in the library in Norfolk, and he's probably helping other prisons. He's a very, very smart person.
Yeah, he just
So,
turned 75 last month.
yes.
Is there any history that you've obtained about Dirk's mother and father? Is it used in that relationship?
So the question was, is there any history that we uncovered about Dirk's mother and father, prior bad acts of the family? The answer is no. We know very little about them. I can tell you, I didn't accept the fact that the children wouldn't speak to me. I accepted it, but I didn't like it. So I read a book that's out there, Children of Nazis. And it's a kind of a cool book that opens your eyes up to the controlling aspect of a family. Now I don't know if I'm not an expert there. I just wanted to what I have done, because you put yourself in that person's position. What I have done that, and knowing what they knew. Now I believe that the children at trial did not know about the infidelities until Marty Murphy spoke of them at trial. I honestly believe that. They may have known some bad things are gonna come out, and but that doesn't mean I killed your mother. So that's when they weren't sure how far we were going to take this. But because of motive, we took it a long way. We had some nasty people in that courtroom that he was associated with, and it's in the book. It's in the book. But I don't know anything of prior history. Yes, ma'am.
What is
No.
his relationship with his children now?
I don't know. I know. Well, Tom can speak of that a little more.
They've supported him throughout his appeals process, which was quite lengthy. It kind of wrapped up in 2010, and they were still coming to the court to support him. So as of 5 years ago, they were, in public supporting him. But I think that's a question that only they can answer, whether or not they really believe he's innocent or they support his claim of innocence, which are kind of two different things. But, at the last public appearance of all of them, they were all still together.
What is his sentence?
Life
no parole.
without parole. Yes.
I have two questions. The first one was, did they know about his infidelity?
I don't know. That's
So there was no proof at all that she had any idea?
There was some speculation, but I could never prove that. We brought some people in. There was some strange things going on, but I never met May Grindeder. I met her sister and her niece. You would think there was some speculation that she knew something, but I don't know if she ever confronted him of it, and I don't think she knew of what exactly he was doing. Perhaps maybe something on the side, a mistress or something, but nothing what was going on here.
She never confided in anybody to say
That's- yeah.
definitively, this is what he's
Question
doing.
is for you. And it's when you start to investigate this, how soon after this murder did you start? And,
As far as covering it,
yeah,
well, they kept it quiet for most of the day. The day of the murder, we were covering, I don't know if you remember that day, but there was a major plane crash off of Nantucket, the Egypt Air 990, took off out of New York and crashed. So we were working that all day long, and then about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we heard that there was a murder in Wellesley. And since they don't have murders in Wellesley, we figured we better check it out.
is that what got you interested in that, or did you, I mean?
Well, that was my job, but then I kind of covered this case for, the way it worked at the Herald was, if you started covering something, you kind of owned it, and you were kind of responsible to keep the coverage going. Now, if you had a day off, someone else would go cover something, but it was it became kind of my job to follow this case. And once I started following it, I started getting to know people and pushing the story forward a little bit, so.
Did you ever disagree with Marty?
Well, Marty wasn't, I only got to know Marty a little bit during the pretrial process. Because before the trial, the year before the trial, there was a bunch of hearings in Dedham Superior Court where it was just the police, the prosecutors, the lawyers, and the press. Marty didn't give away any trade secrets. I had some people that were telling me about the case and that were higher up than him and obviously removed from it because Marty was the investigator. But Marty never gave out any source information. He was very professional. And of course, as the trial went on, we got to know each other, but we wouldn't be talking about, he wouldn't be telling me the stuff that they were doing. We'd be talking football or something.
All right, well, I just kind of wanted to know, did you disagree with the findings of the prosecution?
No, I think I
While you were
was,
writing it,
I think I was, based on the evidence that was uncovered in the testimony that I heard, I was always of the opinion that he did it.
Yes, sir.
You said that his father worked in Buchenwald, and they were he was 5 years old, and they went to Lebanon. Do you have any idea how old the father was, or how old Dirk was when his father died?
Actually, he was alive back in the trial. He never came up here, lived in Connecticut.
His father was
Huh?
still living? His father was still living?
Yes.
At that time, yeah, 15
I don't-
years ago,
I
yeah.
don't-
He must have been what,
Huh?
He must have been what, in his 80s and 90s?
Yeah,
Huh?
he was quite elderly, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was in his late 80s. Yeah, he and his mother lived in Connecticut. His brother lived in, he was a doctor as well.
Yeah, he was-
Lived in the South Shore, I think Weymouth, and never met him. So that part of the family, there's no reason to talk to them.
I just thought his father's influence might have had some twisted
Yes, should be.
I don't-
influence on the kids growing up.
Belinda told us that Dirk was pretty estranged from his parents and his brother.
Yeah, but he still couldn't get an influence from either.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Could've-
Anybody that worked at Buchenwald wasn't the same.
he was
No.
he was an anesthesiologist as well. So they
his
just
father
kinda,
taught medicine at was it the American University in Beirut?
So did Magdalene.
Yeah.
again, this is not about, the question was asked, and that's as much, we did some background, because you want to know about what he was doing. I don't know what he did from the time he was 5 years old to 18 years old. I was really concerned during this investigation that he would flee. He was not arrested. He was indicted February 29th, 4 months after he murdered his wife, because what happens is, and he was free to go wherever he wanted to go. There was no bail. There's nothing. We didn't have enough information to arrest him. I didn't think at that point, but we were very concerned. He was doing a little bit of travel, and we were able to cover that pretty much. We covered him during those 4 months, but I got a little concerned. And just before we indicted him, we're looking for more DNA evidence. We wanted more and more and more information. and he was planning a trip to San Diego, and Mexico was just too damn close. And we just did what, see, now, the other thing, what happens in an investigation like this, we're in charge of the investigation until we put the handcuffs on him. Then he's entitled to a speedy trial. We have no longer in charge of the timing of this trial. So what we had, we had. Now, you heard me already say that even during trial, we were continuing our investigation. We just kept on trying to dig in, and we got more information as went on. But we're a little concerned that he was going to flee. Yes. Yes.
When it first happened, and you said that, she was over there and you were talking to him, and he didn't seem too concerned about her, it seems to me that, of course, there was overkill with her, with all the different wounds. And then he wants a lawyer. Am I going to be arrested? And it seems kind of, if you're not guilty, and you're trying to help your wife, then why would you do that? Did you feel while you were talking to him that deep down that you thought he was guilty?
No.
No?
No, not then. 6 hours later, different story. But right then and there.
Red flag would have gone up with me.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You got to be careful about that. You can't start accusing somebody because you're going to miss something else. My job at that point is to get as much information as I possibly can do. And keep them talking, and just get as much information as I possibly can get, and then follow that information. If it comes back to him, which it did, then that's where it is. But you can't. It's and I know statistics. I don't have to tell me what if a wife's involved, what chances of the husband did it. But you just can't. You can't fall into that trap because it really is a trap. Yeah. Yes.
Two questions. One, did it ever come to light what was the precipitating factor of him losing it and killing her? And secondly, what was the murder weapon?
So, everybody get those questions?
Yeah.
Okay. To answer the first question, what precipitated it, I don't know. There's some speculation. We had 2 other unsolved murders in Norfolk County. Irene Kennedy was killed in Bird Park in Walpole in December. Dick Ranger was killed at Buckmaster Pond in August. They were both in their 70s, and actually Dick was was 85. And May was in a public area, a public park. 2 months later, some speculation he tried to copycat those other unsolved murders. I never ever thought that because I knew too much of what happened to Irene and Dick, and what happened. And this wasn't a progression. The comment was made earlier. It was an overkill. It was totally different than Irene and Dick were killed. But I think he may have. Of course, we didn't. The press loved the idea of a serial killer.
Made perfect sense to us.
3 towns, all in Norfolk County, all makes sense to me. But we're convinced early on that that was never a serious consideration, just because of the wounds and the way she was killed. There's a lot of differences, other than the location. A lot of differences.
And murder weapon?
Murder weapon was so. What happened is Tom talked about a 2-pound drilling hammer. Anybody know what a 2-pound drilling hammer is? It's a small hammer, very, very particular hammer that is made. It used to be, we should know this in Milford, granite quarries. It's used to, in the old days, to split granite. They drill down and they had these pegs and they had this little 2-pound hammer, a little sledgehammer that would split the granite, drilling hammer. He hit her on the back of the head, a glancing blow. May screamed and probably fought back a small amount. He hit her again, a more definitive blow that certainly put her on the ground and maybe even killed her. And then he cut her carotid artery with a buck knife, a 4-inch buck knife, and stabbed her with that same knife. Nice guy, yeah. Yes, sir.
Just curious, at what point did you learn from the chief of police that there had been this domestic disturbances?
There was no reported domestic disturbances. I can tell you that she had
I
bruises.
can understand that in a town like Wellesley and with a doctor and
Right.
well-known and like that. But certainly you must have talked with the chief at some point.
Oh, chief was right there.
He was right there, yeah.
He was right there. Actually, he wasn't there that day, but he got in that night.
And he didn't volunteer the information until later?
No, there
No,
was
that's
no.
a different case. You're confusing the woman they called Marty.
Oh,
She
two
came,
different.
she came to one of our
Oh, okay,
events.
so that
Yeah,
was-
Yeah,
okay.
that's a totally different area.
There was never ever any police reports, or the police had never gone to the house.
I'm just saying, smart Marty Foley says, you don't start abusing your wife by killing her. There's something that precipitated that, and that there was never any there was never ever any sign of that. Now, since the case gets out, we write the book. We have all sorts of different people that we've talked to, and I've heard that May's hairdresser was somebody that I never spoke to, but she spoke to somebody else, and she said that May would come in on Fridays, every other Friday. She never had an appointment. She'd always run in and hassled, she needs her hair done. They would do her hair, and as she walked out the door, she would mess it back up. What does that mean? Control. Dirk didn't want her to do that. She did it. But I think at this point too in May's life, May was gaining some independence. She was going back to school. She was going to be a nurse practitioner. Of all those children and of Dirk in that family, it was reported to us that May was probably the smartest of all those. And he may have, again, Marty Foley, editorial. He may have felt threatened by May's developing this independence. I don't know. But there was certainly, I'm just telling you what the facts are. Yes?
Did they ever determine where those weapons came from, or whose they were?
Well, yeah, they were his. So the folding knife, we never actually determined exactly. They make millions of these things, millions of these knives. So we never really determined where that. But the hammer, I can tell you that there was first of all, Home Depot, Lowe's do not sell this hammer. The place that sold this hammer was Deal's Hardware in Wellesley. And we determined that in 1999, they sold 3 of them. 3 of them. An unknown person bought one with cash. Another person bought one within 2 minutes of Dirk Greineder being in that store buying some nails and screws, because I had the receipt for the nails and screws, and the hammer, which was on the back wall, was purchased through a receipt within 2 minutes after that, on a Saturday morning, I think it was, and I bought the other one. So I know those 3 hammers. So it was a very particular hammer. And the gloves he chose to wear this were also very particular. One store east of the Connecticut River sold these gloves, Deal's Hardware. Dirk not only chose these gloves when he killed his wife, he also used the same types of gloves to clean out his dog cages for his German Shepherds, because we found them in the doghouse. So that's just a coincidence? I don't know. Yes?
How much research was actually done about the missing extra runner? How long did that research and
It
investigation?
had actually, so this actually happened during trial. We get a the judge got a message, what was her name?
Jackie Swirling.
Jackie Swirling, that she had some information that she tried to give the Wellesley Police Department, and Wellesley Police Department blew her off. Wellesley Police Department did have a past history with this person, and she saw a suspicious person within a mile or so of the murder scene, and on the other side of Route 9, and she reported that information. The trial came to a stop. Right before closing arguments, the trial came to a stop. And this was reported in the press, on TV. This is a dramatic thing that happened in the middle of this trial. We start in our investigative mode saying, did we screw something up? Did we not, you want to uncover, turn over everything that you possibly can turn over. You hear some information, you follow it up until the lead is dead. You go all the way through the case like that. Did we miss something? Well, come to find out, no, this was a made-up story, but there was a person, a runner, that did run by Jackie Swirling's house that Sunday morning. He came forward and said, that was me. I used to live in this house when I was a little kid, and I just ran down to see, what was, just to take a look at my old house. And then we followed that up, and it all was true. And then the trial got back on track afterwards. Really, a lot of stress involved there, because thinking, did we miss something here? And the fact is, we didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Did Dirk give you a description of the person that was running away? Not that other runner that you mentioned.
Yeah.
before.
So Dirk never mentioned anybody, a third person to me, ever. He mentioned to other people, but never to me. So in my report, there was never ever a shadows or a third person, or why did he go down that road when his phone is up there? Why did he go there? He never said. In fact, I thought he did that. He went out to the road and went directly to his car. It wasn't until later that we heard that he told other people earlier before I got there, and I was there 20 minutes after, that he had said he saw somebody go down there. Well, he never told me that. So he just, I don't know what he was doing, what he was saying. Well, I know why he may have surmised that we're going to look down there, and that's where the murder weapons and the gloves were. A glove was found.
Bill Keir saw him come out.
Right.
So there was an eyewitness coming down the pond, down the main road, who saw him come out of the area where certain things were later found. So I think that's why he was telling the
Right.
first responding officers, because he had to come up with an excuse as to why he was down there when he knew that there's probably going to be some bad things found out.
But he never told me that, though.
Wasn't his excuse, though, that he was chasing a person?
Yeah.
Who supposedly...
It changed. He talked to Jill McDermott, I think Jill. The story, as Marty will say, his story, depending on each retelling, either to the same investigators or to different investigators, it changed a little bit. So when they all huddled later and were going through stuff, they were kind of like, well, he told me this, and not even like, well, he told me this, which is a little different.
And that's really what happens too in these investigations. You have all these pods of information. And I'm telling you, my back was to the scene. I'm talking to Dirk, and there's a lot going on behind me. And I know that. I can hear my bosses arriving and giving out orders, and I knew we had some eyewitnesses there. But my job at this point was staying with Dirk at this, and then following it through. Even I get back to his house, and then it wasn't until I get back to the crime scene about 3 o'clock that afternoon that I got some additional information that, oh, by the way, you might want to talk to the canine guy because the dog hit on something down that little path there. And then it wasn't until probably 6 o'clock that night that I'm back at the police station. We're actually starting to do a search warrant, and now you get all this information coming towards us, and now that's, it was all making more and more sense. don't forget, that first search warrant happened at about 1 o'clock in the morning at Dirk's house. My first search warrant of many, many search warrants. And so at that point, I had to believe that there was evidence of a crime that could be found at his house in Wellesley. Big step, right? So where am I? I'm clearly at this point, I'm saying, I think he's involved. And the judge had to say, I think you're right, Marty. You know, go ahead, knock on his door. No, not really knock on his door. Well, we did knock on his door. But, you know, so that's how it progressed from talking to him at the Morse's Pond to doing that first search warrant. Yes?
Was the murder scene where she was found?
Yes. Yeah, well, she was dragged a few feet from that scene, clearly dragged. So, yes?
German Shepherds are very protective. Do you feel the dog was there when the murder took place?
Yeah, you know, I had German Shepherds growing up, and I had a German Shepherd at this time, a female German Shepherd, and I'm not a dog expert. I can tell you this dog had no idea what the hell was going on. You know, what the hell is Dad doing? You know, or if the dog was even there. You know, there was no dog prints in the round, like really close to May. I don't know if the dog was even there. It could have been tied up somewhere. And we did look for, you know, leash marks on trees and bushes. So I don't know if the dog was even there. But if that dog could talk.
I got a question.
Yes.
What were the motives? Did he have any, like, big insurances on her or anything, or any financial problems?
The question was about motive as far as insurance and any type of life insurance on her or whatever. There was the normal things. They just happened to be going through a estate planning, and they were doing some insurance work within that week. In fact, that Friday. So there was something going on. We brought it up, but I don't think it was anything. It was just part of regular, you know, what they were doing is, you know, planning their estates. Now, in his mind, you know, I'm sure there was something. He was trying to get this in order, but it was nothing really. No red flags that would go towards that. We found out that information. We dug through it. We reported it, but it was never a big deal as far as the jury goes.
Was anything ever found out more about the financial status of the family at that time? It seemed very weird to me personally that they were struggling so much and had such a small house. He was phenomenally famous and infamous doctor at this point, but
Well,
his wife had
the house wasn't a Wellesley mansion, but it
No,
was
not
certainly,
small.
but it wasn't that small either. It was actually quite big. Inside, they did a lot of work. They were doing renovations because their oldest daughter was getting married. They're doing some renovations. So it really wasn't small. It was a tri-level house with a big wing in the back. It wasn't small, but it was probably, at the time, I think probably about $500,000, maybe a little bit more than $500,000 in Wellesley, of homes that it was probably a little above average, about average. But it was in a, upper middle class neighborhood, nothing really crazy. There was no, they weren't in trouble financially. But they did put 3 kids through Ivy League schools, and 2 of them are going to med school, and that's $1 million right there.
They were talking about remortgaging, the necessity for remortgaging. Well,
Yep, that's true. And but we all do that.
strange.
Yeah, we all we're just looking to just tighten up. But I think Dirk was tight. Plus his extracurricular activities were expensive. They were about $500 a whack. Yes. Yes, please.
2 questions. Number 1, obviously when he went walking in the woods with his wife, and he probably had this hammer on him.
He was wearing a backpack.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, he had hidden stuff out in the woods, so he could have hidden it out
Or
there.
it could have been planted there.
Sure.
And then he directed her to the area and,
He was out there the day before.
okay.
They walked, they were regular walkers there.
Number 2, when you did go to the house with the warrant, did you find any evidence?
We found that receipt. The biggest thing we walked out away from that day is that receipt for the nails from Deal's Hardware that were purchased a couple minutes before the hammer. And this is all just due diligence, just, you know, building little pieces of this wall, and that was just a little piece of the wall. So we never had a smoking gun in this case. So there's lots of circumstantial evidence that came together to build this wall of evidence, and that's, you know, that's common in any case.
What's your personal feelings about him now?
I don't have any.
Yeah.
I don't have any. I don't. You know, I don't think about him often. You know, I mean, he's a murderer. I mean, other than, you know, I think he's, you know, he's a coward. But, you know, I don't think about it. I wouldn't waste any time and effort of my personal feelings. If you read the book, you can't get how I feel. But, you know, I was very, very relieved, and I was pleased that he was found guilty. I was relieved that he was found guilty for the sake of May's sister Ills and Belinda and their family, because they were living this hell. And I'm not sure what the heck would have happened if he was found not guilty. I really don't. But, you know, he's just, you know, just common trash. Yes, either one.
I wanted to ask about the DNA that was found on the gloves that she was wearing.
Yep.
Could that have been somehow planted? I mean, could he have like worn those gloves the day before?
So you're talking about the DNA that the defense attorney mentioned in opening arguments that was never mentioned again in the case?
Right.
That piece of DNA. So what happens with DNA is something called an anomaly. All right. So when you're charting these a piece of evidence out, you may get a spike that would indicate there's something else there. So you would check. And if that never shows up again, it's explained away as an anomaly. It's almost like you run direct currents, and every once in a while, in that direct current, you have a spike. Nobody knows why. It just happens. Could have been the how it was detected or whatever. So there was never a third person that was introduced to this case with DNA. DNA in this case was okay. It wasn't great. It was okay. The one thing this DNA did is it never didn't show Dirk. You know, so Dirk was always a part of this, Dirk or May. It always was a part of this, but it was never. It was just again a piece of the puzzle. We had to explain our way through with this. Our lab was the same lab that the defense, that prosecution used in the O.J. Simpson case, and the same person that testified. And in 2 days of testimony, that, you know, it was like horrible for the jury, you know, just describing, you know, DNA and how, you know, this is minuscule molecules. And the one person on the jury that we thought would get this, the dentist, said, bah, threw it away. You know,
There was never a full profile for Dirk, but it, like Marty said, it didn't exclude him. And that one, if there was a small thing of DNA in her glove, that was only one tiny part of a full profile. And again, it could have been just an anomaly, a spike. But the same thing too is, I mean, these are May's gloves, right? I mean, she probably had them, she could have easily had somebody else's DNA on them from before. They tried to really make a big deal out of that, and it really, without having a full profile, it really didn't resonate with us. And Murphy cross-examined Robin Cotton, like Marty said. It was like 2 days. It was mind-numbing, and it was like, there was no air conditioning in there. It was like 100 degrees. It was awful. Like Grundy did a great job. He went up with the DNA. He laid out what they had. It was very easy to understand. And then Marty Murphy's job was to try to pick that apart. And I'll give him credit, he tried. But after 2 days of that cross-examination, I don't think he really dented the jury with that. And like Marty said, they didn't really the DNA didn't really work for them. It was too dense. The thing that really worked for them was like blood spatter evidence, which is very simple to understand. It's basic physics. You know, when they said he was within feet or inches of her during the bloodshed incident, you know, that's pretty powerful. And the timeline of where he was and said he was, where other people saw him, that the investigators did a tremendous job of finding these people, interviewing them, figuring out where they were at a certain time so that, you know, there were basically people all around them, and nobody saw some strange guy running out of the park or anything. So those were the things that really resonated with the jury. The DNA was, you know, didn't really do much for the jury.
Yes?
Did he ever get into a relationship after he had killed his wife?
No,
So he was,
that I know of. And I would have known. Yes?
That was a tremendous amount of rage to kill like that. Was his mental state ever questioned?
Well, he was never examined.
Yeah, he was never examined officially. I think you have to have some sort of mental issue to do something like this.
I would say.
Yeah, but I think what happened is he thought she would die. And you know the weird thing about all of us in this room, we all don't want to die. And I don't think he took that into account. May was a fighter. And he was not a good murderer. He murdered her, but it wasn't clean, it wasn't fast, it wasn't what he expected, because he had an elaborate plan. He had an elaborate plan that just went awry. He couldn't, when May didn't go down right away, I think he panicked. Right. You know, and he was a planner, and he knew what he wanted to do, how he wanted to do it. He just didn't do it. And, you know, May was a big part of that. She didn't want to die. Yes?
Maybe I'm confusing cases, but was he the one that cut her heart out?
Different case, Rosenthal.
All right.
Yes?
I'm going home and locking doors now. Because what I'm hearing is a lot of, he said, circumstantial evidence.
Follow up on what?
On the whole thing, like is he questioning you, like is that circumstantial evidence or not?
I was happy with it. I mean, I did everything I possibly could. There was no new evidence in this case. We presented what we found, and the jury found guilty. This case is done. I move on.
Yeah, we've never
You know?
had anybody challenge, you know, that he's really.
I could, you know, I don't check about Dirk grinded it. I don't care. I have nothing. I have no thoughts of this guy. It's you know, there are many people like him out there though.
When he's, on all his appeals to get a new trial, he's tried to appeal on things that wouldn't exonerate him, but on things that like a technicality, like they didn't test the DNA the right way, or there were people that weren't allowed in the courtroom when they did jury selection, or it's all procedural stuff that he's trying to get overturned. It's not like they're
He
trying
didn't
to
do it.
introduce
Right.
a new suspect, right? So, you know, the only hope that he had was to get a new trial and hope to convince a different jury that he didn't do it.
I guess the reason I'm asking is, you're talking about circumstantial evidence, and that kind of irritates or hits me wrong. It's one thing to find the right in his hands or what,
Yeah.
you know, and especially where he was that close to everything, not having.
I mean, having seen it all, I wouldn't really call it circumstantial. It was all evidence. It just wasn't like smoking gun evidence. And what they did was, they did a great job of, like Marty said, was building the wall, okay? So you've got the blood spatter evidence. You've got what he said at the pond and what people saw him do that contradicted that.
Well, I
So,
apologize, but I always try to take you.
well, that's fine. I mean, it's, you good defense.
I'm glad you were busy that day and we're on the jury. But actually, no, we had people on the jury that very much did not want to convict him. and they came down and they convicted him with the information we gave them. So it's not, when you put the whole story together, and that's what this book has tried to do. We put the whole story together, and there was nobody else. There was nobody else. Yes.
Her sister and her niece had, obviously they weren't crazy about him, and they had issues with him. Did they ever see any signs of domestic violence or any?
No.
Nothing?
Nope.
No, and I don't think that they disliked Dirk before all this happened. I think they would admit that he was quirky and he had his ways, but they would come up and visit. Belinda would come up and spend a week up in Wellesley and bring her kids up there. I think it's only after they started to really look at this objectively after the murder, and then, when they met with Marty, I think they slowly came to the realization that he did it, and it was very obviously upsetting for them, but I think once they came to that realization, and that they came to that realization. But I think they had Ilse testified on the stand. She said in 30 years of knowing Dirk, they had never shared, as she put it, a crossword between the two of them. So, they were supportive of him right in the immediate aftermath of it. They were like, I can't believe the police are looking at you. I mean, because everybody thought they had this perfect marriage.
Anybody else?
Aren't all marriages perfect?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
No comment.
Yes.
The deal store have video?
Say again? No. No, they didn't have computers. We had a pallet of receipts. Pallet.
Yeah, don't forget, it was 1999 when the murder happened.
Yeah.
It's not like today where there's a video camera everywhere. There's probably a video camera in here, but no.
There is one right there.
I'm looking up on the ceiling because no.
Yes.
The role of the adult children intrigues me. Were they ever asked to testify as to their father's character and their parents' relationship?
Yep.
And did they deny any knowledge of their father's escapade?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. They stood by their father throughout.
The way they would put it is there was no way he could do this to her. They were very close. They were very close in the family. The thought of him doing that to her was just something this is what they would say, that they couldn't even comprehend. They would never believe it.
Yes.
You said that there was some kind of weird or freaky people that came to court. I guess, I don't know, people that had something to do with him, ill repute.
Oh, no.
Witnesses.
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 What kind of people?
Prostitutes. People who owned these XXX rated websites.
People he met on the internet that he arranged to meet.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was a week of, that was the sex testimony week, and it really didn't resonate with the jury.
He was everything. He wasn't sure what he was.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The children, do you think that they truly believe that he's innocent?
I personally believe that the oldest daughter and the son probably deep down don't believe he's innocent. The youngest daughter has been his most vocal supporter. I could see her believing. I just don't know, it's my own personal opinion, but I think unless you're in total denial based on all the evidence that was presented, and I don't know if they've read the book or not, but I would think they would have to at least have some doubts about his innocence, but.
And I have no comment one way or the other. They never talked to me, so.
Yeah. All we can go on is what they've said in public, and they've been very supportive always in public.
Yes.
Would you be surprised if these adult children might in 5 years write their own book?
I would kind of doubt it.
Yeah.
I would kind of doubt it.
That'd be interesting, though.
It would be interesting. I don't see, unless they felt they had some kind of evidence that would prove him innocent, which I don't see that happening. I think like a lot of people involved, because, you know, he devastated that whole family. He killed May. He messed his kids' lives up for the rest of their lives. He messed up Ilse and Belinda's life for the rest of their lives. I don't see them writing a book how that would.
Because he was found guilty anyway, so what was their point of getting together and presenting this front for nice family and everything else? He was found guilty at the end anyway.
Yeah, but they didn't know that.
Yeah.
They didn't know that when they were doing this.
Yeah.
That
I mean,
was-
it was very powerful having them there. Their support was very powerful for the jury, especially as Marty mentioned. They did not want to convict them. I mean, they didn't want to send somebody to jail for the rest of their life, number one, and number two, you know, they're seeing the kids there and supporting them. But they just came to the realization, when they went into the jury room, they went through every single witness, every single piece of evidence, and they started making a list of coincidence or not a coincidence, things like that. And at the end of the day, you know, the believable stuff that he was saying was here, and what the evidence showed was here. And they collectively decided that beyond a reasonable doubt that he had committed the murder. Again, without what the real motive is, other than, you know, the domestic violence and that the ultimate act of control is to kill somebody. But why he actually did it, he only knows. And, you know, I just think the jury did a fantastic job in this case and put their emotions aside. And at the end of the day, at the end of 4 days, they decided that he did it.
All right. Yes.
Do you feel the town of Wellesley supported him, or?
Supported Dirk?
Yeah.
No. No, town of Wellesley supported the police department in their investigation. And I thank them many, many times, because when you think about it, this investigation cost a lot of money. Their defense cost a lot of money. We can't go one-to-one with a high-priced attorney. We just can't do that. The state can't do that. Every piece of DNA that we were very selective of what we're going to do. Every piece of DNA cost us $2,500 to have it checked. This is before the State Police Crime Lab was up and running with DNA, right in the beginning of it. So we sent it out to a private lab, and we're being frugal. We're being careful of what we're doing here, and we weren't getting what we wanted to get. We didn't get that smoking gun, but we wanted to, you know, keep on trying to get something. So you just can't spend what you don't have. So we have to be really, really careful of what we did. Yes.
I didn't want to confuse it, but I think you have to know this now. The Bird Park murder.
Yep.
Walpole, that you were talking about earlier.
Irene Kennedy.
Did that ever get?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
They get some.
Yep. And that person's doing life in prison as well, without parole.
And it wasn't this guy that they, remember there was some guy they.
No,
Yeah,
it wasn't
no.
him. He was, no, that was, one thing I can say about, so what happened, they arrested the wrong person, and I got transferred into that office about that same day. So I had nothing to do with that one. But it was, you know, it was bad, you know, bad things happened. That's why you know, it took us 4 months before the grand jury indicted Dirk. And that's, we were just collecting evidence during that whole time.
Do you mind telling me the guy that did it, why he did it? What
Dirk?
murder that- no.
Martin Guy, he was a sexual predator. He was just a nasty person. Just he lived in a rooming house, killed another person
He's
as
been
well.
convicted of 2 murders.
Yep. All right. Well, I want to thank you again for what you. Thank you.